Hello guys, welcome back to Writer's Tales. We're here, The Last Adventurers. First story. This is Britain 89 AD, so the very first one. So, let's not beat around the bush, let's get into the plot of what's going on in the synopsis, really. So, in Kendal 1989, 89 just to be precise, as the title suggests, it's the summer, heat wave, second summer of love, some of the rave, everyone's having a good time during the rave scene, of course. St. Kendal, of course, my hometown. 6 toddlers have vanished and into thin air, away from the families. Parents don't even know where they got to. There's one, one blink of eye, they're over there. Next thing you know, they're gone. Or if they turn their back or something, they just mysteriously disappeared. And this is all happening in the town, only in the town centre at the moment. It's not happening anywhere elsewhere, like worldwide or anything. It's just happening in this town centre, really. Well, in the town, various, what do you call it? Various different places. I don't know if you call them like districts or boroughs. We call them whatever you call them, really. But yeah, that's been happening. We get introduced to characters. We get introduced to 5 teenagers, of course. So we've got Christopher. He's more like a leaderish type fella, very much, very sort of jockish, very sort of athletic type fella, really. We've got Julian, who's the token black fella, who's very sort of into the level, sort of like I would say he's quite sassy in a way, and just like he can be a bit of a douche sometimes, if you know what I mean. But he's something like that, really. We're going to introduce Mark, who's sort of the geeky nerd, the fanboy, very much, of the group, of course. And they've been to Manchester. They have doing for a rave. They've just come back recently. And they just noticed our 6th member has, 6th victim has been taken, of course, or been missing, and has been plastered around all over the place. We also get introduced to the other 2, which are 2 females, Hannah and Abby. Hannah and Christopher do have a thing, really, very much. That sort of thing, like there's always a bit of like a love relationship thing with them, really, that sort of thing. And you got Abby as well, who's just like straight up sort of. I'm trying to think of the name. She can be like headstrong, very level-headed type character, of course. That interesting thing, it's sort of a bit of a cow, really, to be honest. Has her own way, can be a bit snarky with people, very much. But she's there with the gang, of course. And so they all meet up because Chris, Mark, and Julian have been to Manchester, and obviously they get around, tell them what their experiences are, of course. What was it like? Did they get arrested and stuff like that? Just like, did anything crazy happen? And so soon afterwards, we introduce a character called Trevor Norman. Trevor Norman is actually based on Chris Eccleston, believe it or not. Always based on his performance in. I always think of like Our Friends in the North, and he has 2 other friends, of course, who are based on Mark Strong and Daniel Craig, believe it or not, in the town. So there's that bit of an element of Our Friends of the North in this story, very much. So we're going to introduce to him, and he's asked Chris to babysit his niece, Cassie, who's only 5 years old, or 4 or 5. It's never really clear. I think 4 or 5, really. And he's basically going to Liverpool for his sister because his sister is a heroin addict, and so he's taking her to Liverpool to be rehabilitated, get all the stuff, really, to be honest. And it's very, tends to happen. I mean, because in fairness, a few people are on drugs now and again these days, of course. So it's quite a normal thing. It's a regular thing around in the UK, of course. And so he ends up babysitting Cassie. The gang come round on the night, of course, and have a little party, of course, doing the whole babysitting thing, of course. Then they hear crash and bangings, of course, from the back garden, from Chris's back garden. Note his parents are not there, really, because they're apparently on holiday, of course, being abroad, wherever abroad is, really. So he's on the house of his own. He's looking after someone else's kid, and they got intruders in the back garden. And once they reveal who it is, it's actually the characters who are mentioned in the intro, of course, the protagonist. They're burying something in his garden, an aerial of sort. Because they've been finding some weird signals, of course, but also they've been keeping an eye on the streets, and they notice a few muscular like men are prowling around in the night, of course, so they've been keeping an eye on that. Also, there's been a car going around, like a battered Volkswagen GT covered in graffiti, just going around the streets, snooping around very slowly, looking around each houses. So something's up. So they introduce themselves. They're quite shocked to actually believe that they're real, of course, because they're from television, they are, of course, and so it's like it's a bit strange. They knew some of them, but some of them are quite from the future, very much. If you know what I mean, of course. Some of them are from the 90s, of course, so they don't really understand. It's like I used to win. Well, they do say they're from the future, of course, you know, and they basically tag along with the gang, and you know, and they set camp in Christopher's house, of course, as a base operations, really. They noticed these babysitting Cassie, of course, and they found like she could be next, and they actually say we'll probably stick with you just in case if she goes, you know, it comes as a part of responsibility very much. So after that, so they basically stay, heavy party ensues, and you know, Chris and Hannah get together, of course, and well, the protagonists look after Cassie after we all sort of make her sleep, really, just to keep her happy, and you know, there's carry on, of course, you know, like it's just like a very small house party that's been going on. The next day, of course, everyone's completely wasted, apart from the protagonist. Tries to wake them up with some, you know, these sort of whatever you call it, cook breakfast and everything else, and you know, try and make some breakfast for them. Try to wake them up by whacking a spoon against a frying pan, of course, just to wake them up like you do old-fashionedly. And yes. Pretty interesting. But one thing they also did was they were rooting out for any other disappearances. So they leave afterwards in a car that apparently Chris was also looking after as well, because one of his neighbours, or someone he knows, says, "Can you look after my car for me?" Of course, while he's away. He's away for a week actually. So, and they basically take the keys. They do because Chris is wasted. Well, he's had sex with Hannah actually, so having his just had his night with his woman, of course, and so they're basically just gone, of course, you know, just staying together. They sneak out in the early hours of the morning, of course, and they basically take a Triumph Stag, which belonged to the owner that Chris is looking after the car for. So they basically drive off in this thing. I'm trying to look around for any other suspicious activity, of course. While they're doing that, of course, there's two young police officers that are nearby. I think nearby on one of the streets, and apparently they're complaining. And actually, as they go past, they actually saw stop because the police officers are complaining that there's a police box chained to a lamppost in the street, and it's obstructing people's views. And apparently they said, "Oh, it's ours." And obviously they said, there's no permission, you don't have a warrant for it, and that sort of thing, of course. And that really, you have these overzealous young coppers, of course, who are basically just like, really, really pissed off about this thing. They said we can't do anything about it because it went a bit faulty. We can't get up to it. We can't pull it down, of course. So they changed it to a lamppost to stop it escaping or flying like a balloon. And it's like, okay, and one of the police officers is based on Jake Wood, of course, if you're familiar, because I remember seeing him in Red Dwarf 8, and he was actually pretty good in that. So I always picture him as a young police officer who's very sort of like just by his own rules, really, of course, and that sort of thing. So that's where it really comes from. So Jake Wood's very much depicted in this story as a police officer, and so. But they do reappear, of course, like two bumbling officers, really, like the Thompson twins, of course, from Tintin, that sort of thing. And basically, and they basically just say, "Well, we'll sort it out later," and it's basically just drive off and leave them in the dust. You think, for God's sakes, and they thought, because they have also the case as well to do some investigation as well, so or traffic duty, whatever they tend to do. So they drive off, of course. And while that's happening, another young kid gets abducted, but this time it's depicted as like he's playing in the garden. Then he's sort of like he's controlled, and he walks down the pavements, and you only see the depiction of someone in like leather boots walking on the same street and just swipe this little kid off of the in public, well in the open when no one's looking, just out of nowhere, and then the parents go freakily mad that their child has gone missing, of course, and has disappeared. So that's like the seventh victim, of course, that's been taken. And obviously, the protagonists return because they've been investigating. They've actually been looking around on the outskirts of Kendal, actually, to see if anything's happening. So they return, just looking behind, from a short vantage point where the police are just investigating. They just look overhead and think, there's another one taken. Also, during that time, probably that's it really. I'm just trying to think of Tom Head again because it's, I got a lot of stuff to do with that. A lot of stuff to cover in this one. So that night, of course, they suggest, why don't we just go to the pub crawl? So in British typical fashion, they go to the pub. They go to the Duke of Cumberland, which is nearby. Now the protagonists are bitter drinkers. They drink bitter. They do. It's their preferred drink, of course. Why is this sort of thing? Because it's actually something my dad used to drink many years ago. He's a bitter drinker, my dad. So I thought, take a bit of influence from family, and it's like, yeah, I'll probably do. So then you go to Duke of Cumberland, of course, have a decent pint. Then this gang show up, this punk gang known as the Splatter Punks, who are basically a bunch of heroin addicts who are basically just causing trouble, really. Want to make a fight, really. And they start harassing people, of course, and one of them sticks a knife out, of course, and that sort of thing, just really being psychotically crazy and a bit scary as well. And they sort of step in and beat the crap out of them, of course, and just throw them out of the Duke of Cumberland. Just beat the living shit out of them, really. And they said, we'll return and we'll beat the shit out of you, or something like that. It's like, they'll come back and fuck them, or shank them, or whatever, or stab them, whatever. And they basically flee, of course, like a bunch of cowards afterwards. Like, we'll have a revenge, that sort of thing. And of course, the landlord's quite pleased, of course, and it's like, through all drinks round, of course, as you do. Afterwards, the next day, they go to Woolworths, because Chris and the gang go and see a friend, a mate that's called Jack, of course, who's one of the employees there. And they basically just go in there, they basically look around, but they're quite and then they become surprised and very mortified of the VHS releases that they have in children's VHS, because it's got them on the cover, or some of them, of course, and some other shows as well. And this triggers them to actually take them all off the shelf and basically, plan to destroy them, like it's destroying the evidence or something. And it's like, oh really? But while doing that, a bunch of men come in, but they're not really men. They're soldiers, but they're not really they're soldiers, but they're actually ogrons. And you think, oh, so this is the people who have been going around. These are the muscular men who have been going around at night, surveying areas and stuff. So, and they actually found out where they've been watching the protagonists, and also the gang as well, with Cassie as well. And so they demand the child. They said no, of course. And a big showdown ensues in Woolworths. The gang flee with Cassie, of course. They all go and open fire on everybody because there's customers in there. They shoot the customers, shoot the customers and kill Jack as well. He gets caught in the crossfire, gets a laser blast into his forehead, unfortunately. He's actually based on Adam Martin, believe it or not. So Adam Martin, famous YouTuber for idents and stuff like that, 80s fashion, of course, crazy hair. And yes, pretty good. Yeah, pretty cool guy. But he gets blasted, of course, and being the fine shoes, of course. Most of the customers are shot dead by the ogrons. They're very just hell-bent, killing them. The protagonists end up killing them, of course, but I think some of them, like people like Toe, get in front of a window, of course, in the middle of public. Something like a Terminator 2 Judgment Day, really, and there's basically just like, and go back into the action, of course. Two ogrons chase the gang into the market hall, Kendal Market Hall, and also that just ensues, of course, again, people getting killed. The market gets complete trash, of course, because the ogrons are very muscular, like the Ape-like soldiers, of course, and it's basically just going like, all over the place. The Britannians soon after join, of course, because they killed the Iranian Ogons who were trying to kill them, of course. They end up tackling them in the market hall, and afterwards they basically say, right, let's flee, let's go. They kill the Ogons, of course. One of them, the final one, of course, they chase him down into the road near the bus station, really. But he ends up being crushed by HGV, of course, and basically gets flattened, gets killed, really, unfortunately. So because didn't stop in time, he just ran across the road and just went psh, like that, completely gone. Afterwards, they go back to their home base, which is in Sanderlands, of course. Trevor comes back and finds what's been going on. He gets completely mad with Chris and threatens to kill him because his niece was caught in the crossfire in this attack. So he's one of the reasons to blame. Then the Spypunks come along and basically said, they want revenge, of course, and there's speaking fine shoes in the streets, of course. But also there's a few other people as well, like a few of the neighbours come around and just basically arm with fisticuffs and it's like you want a piece of me, don't you? It's like, boom. And then it all goes haywire, and Cassie runs off, and she runs off in terror, of course, and then the Spypunks, I think a couple of them go on the car and try and track her down. And then the protagonists follow afterwards, including the gang, of course. They basically just because the Cyberpunks, most of them, the punks themselves are sort of knocked down unconscious, but a couple of them, two of them are basically skipped in the car just trying to get this girl. And in doing so, they basically accidentally run her over. They crush Cassie. They run over a little girl, crush her in the car, and they basically just flee. Just like that. And Trevor's in gone. The protagonists over there just hover like shadows, and they're basically they're very, they don't say anything, of course, but they're very surprised that this gang has run over a child in the middle of the street, broad daylight, just and they take to the hospital, dies from injuries, shockingly. When the gang arrive at the hospital, of course, Trevor's there. Cassie's gone, unfortunately, and the protagonists themselves just vanish because they walked with the gang that did, Chris and the gang, and they disappeared. They did out of the hospital. Then we cut to, we've got about Sandlands we do, and the Spypunks are doing heroin. They're making them on heroin, just Annabelle, and that's all things junked out of the minds, really. Then there's a brick crashes through the window, and that startles them. Then the protagonists break inside, they bust down the door. How they managed to find the location of the Spypunks is just unclear, really. Keep it a mystery there. But the break-in, bit of a massive scuffle there is, and most of the equipment they're using made for heroin actually catches fire. Well, it gets knocked around and whole place catches fire around the curtains and everything else, and also the room, so the whole place, the whole drug den is engulfed in flames. The leader, of course, who goes with the name of Rent, who tries to shoot them with a gun, but except obviously misses, of course, because he gets knocked and he ends up shooting his own leg by accident, and in doing so, they just tell him, who you're working for and everything else, and it's revealed that they say it is a green witch with a Welsh accent. They don't know her full name. They exactly know who it is, and they basically leave them. They did because they killed a child in front of them, and this is a recurring thing for other series. This is so. It's their punishment, so therefore they have to die. And they end up being burnt alive in the drug den because of it. So the police get involved, of course. They see the damage, of course. The gang sort of come on the next morning as well to notice that the drug den, the Spypunks' drug den, is burned. Singed, it's like charcoal black and everything else. It's just like, And they meet up with the protagonists in town somewhere. having cooked breakfast and, that sort of thing. And they actually found out who it is, and it's someone called Fenella, the Kettle Witch, of course, who remembers who's from Shelter of the Wheelers, of course, is behind this, and she's around the town centre kidnapping children with the Ogrons as well. The Sparpunks were used as moles there to search out people who actually were the customers, their customers, and it's like, and they know they have like children and stuff like that, so it's like, again, it's like snooping out the customers' children, of course, so they can be kidnapped. That's the main idea, or one of the step in the plans, really. So they look around, and they know some strange activity with the sewers. Or the drains, really, to be honest. And they basically just come, just researching around because they think, is she hiding in the drains? Is she? And actually, in actual fact, she is. She's hiding in the drains, of course. Like, planning from down below with the Ogrons, of course. And basically she escapes, she does, of course. Indeed. But also, while doing so, they somehow come on the drains, they do. And have a chase through the town centre, of course. She vanishes, of course, because she's a witch, really. So she disappears, and also the police interfere as well in there by trying to arrest them, really. It's like, and that sort of thing. There you go. But in doing so, they told them what's really going on. Not really no sense of belief in saying, we don't believe you, really. That sort of thing. But they say, we know the truth, really. And also probably know where they've kept them, really. So they hatch a plan, and it's actually in a business park, which is the Lake District Business Park, which in the building, of course, in a factory that deals with formula, believe it or not, powder formula, which is something that Fenella has actually taken over, really. I don't know why she's taking over like a formula factory. It's never really explained, really. She's not using it for anything like that to grow for anything. She's kidnapped these 7 children, of course, to actually who are to was it to harness a bit more of like a youth thing or something like that, or something like that, really. It's a bit of a strange plot in her mind, really, to do it. Because these kids are normal kids, healthy normal kids, but who come from parents who have drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and everything else. It's like she's kidnapped these children, of course, because they're healthier, but she knows that the parents themselves are not, or let's say psychologically well, mentally unwell, physically unwell, that sort of thing, because of what they're going through at the moment in substances and stuff. So it's like, she just wants to harness. She's willing to harness his power, of course, really, like a life force type thing, really. But involves taking these kids, sacrificing them, and just using that sort of help. Like, what is it to do with these? What do these kids have in common, really? We don't know much about this plan, really, unfortunately. Like, it's to do with something that she'd done a while back, that she was in league with, actually, which she mentions in the drains, of course. Like, she was part of something, but then it's either that she got thrown out of this sort of legal syndicate or whatever, and basically goes on her own and does her own thing, really. So this was part of her plan. This was, but it's never been used. But we'll get there eventually, hopefully, with that one. So in doing so, they sabotage her plan, of course, through the children, of course, and destruction breaks out with in a fight out in the Lake District Business Park, of course, with the Ogrons, of course. And the police as well, they somehow get involved in Chris and the gang as well. Just a massive fight really going on. Fernando escapes into a car, some black BMW or something, and give chase through Kendall with the protagonist of the trying staff they borrowed, like Chris is meant to look after. And that ensues, and basically crashes, of course. You know, Fenella gets crashes suddenly. She dies suddenly in the car accident, of course, because it instantly crushes her. She ends up dead. Same with the organ as well. Car's completely damaged as well in terms of both cars. The car that tries to stack herself is completely destroyed as well because of the rampaging destruction of the chase as well. That goes on through Kendall, and yes, and that's really for most of the story. Then afterwards, they say goodbyes. The TARDIS itself, or known as the ship, they said, "Oh, the ship's ready." You know, it's finally stopped. It stopped hovering. They unchain it, of course, and it's like, they basically go on. The gang don't come with them. They're not travelling companions. They basically just stay. They did ask him, say, "Do you wish to come and travel with us?" And they said no, because we're happy here. We've got our own lives. We've got stuff to build on, really. And so they depart, of course, and they go on adventures now. And that's written 89 AD, the very first story. This was originally titled Nothing at the End of the Lane. That was a working title. It was an old story that I think it was originally came from the 50 Situation line that was totally different, but it ended up becoming a Doctor Who fan story next, and then became this, really. It was originally meant to be set in 1994 in a place called Colmshaw, which was like a fictional suburban, bit like Perivale, really. So, yeah. But I saw a video involving Kendall in 1989, of course, and it's spearheaded from there. I thought maybe say this open story in my hometown, really, in the late 80s, which would be very interesting. So, and there we go. So that's the very first story, Britain 89 AD. The title comes from another, abandoned Doctor Who story called Britain 408 AD. But it's all play on that, really, because I wanted a short title, really. And Nothing at the End of the Lane, which was working out for another child, which was the ideal pilot name for it, was dropped. Sort of like a last minute thing, really. So there you go. Hope you enjoy this, guys. It's a bit of a long-winded video, of course, but there's going to be plenty more where that came from. But anyway, guys, as always, I'll see you for the next video, of course, and as always, see ya.